All right, so now we're going to talk about Stanley Milgram's very famous obedience study, looking at um, obedience to authority and what would get us to give someone authority and how obedient would we be to that person. So Milgram was actually a student of Ash, who studied the conformity, and because obedience and conformity and compliance are all very much intertwined with each other. So Milgram was interested in this because it was after World War II, and Americans were feeling really smug after World War II. They were feeling very much like, we would never let what happened in Germany and Austria and all the concentration camps and Hitler, like, we would never let that happen here, right? Americans would never do that. Americans would never go along with that. Americans would never have concentration camps. We're so much better than those Germans and those Austrians. There must be something significantly bad about the German people, the Austrian people, and Americans would not do that. Right, even though, side note, we totally were putting Japanese people in internment camps. But, we were feeling pretty smug. Look at how great America is. And Milgram and Ash and most social psychologists were like, you know what? I don't think Americans are any better than Germans or Austrians or French or Zimbabweans or Thai people. I think we're all the same. And I think we would just be as likely to have something like this happen, because really what it boils down to is giving an authority figure authority, right? Or making someone an authority figure and then obeying them. And I think that's a people thing, not a German thing, right? So Milgram kind of wanted to prove this, that Americans are kind of just as horrible and just as likely to hurt others, be due to an authority figure telling them to, as German soldiers were in World War II. Because when social scientists talked to former Nazi soldiers and asked them, like, why did you do these horrible things, right? How could you work in a concentration camp? How could you, kill all these people? Like, did you hate Jewish people that much? And the majority of them said, no. I had friends that were Jewish. I thought it was horrible. Well, then why did you do it? Well, I was being told to do it. We had to follow it, right? Or the German people, like, why didn't you stick up for, the Jews? Why didn't you say, hey, this isn't right? And again, it was like, well, Hitler told us it was. So we just kind of said, sure, we guess we got stuff to go along with this then. All right, another kind of form of groupthink, right? All of this very much ties in together. And we can really even take this down all the way to our Gestalt principles of, similarity and proximity, right? People that are like us, are similar, we're going to respond to. People that are different than us, we're going to say, oh, you're different, I'm going to view you differently. So since a lot of the Nazi soldiers, burned their uniforms, renounced it, didn't want anyone to know they were Nazi soldiers, they didn't want to do it, but they did it anyway. Milgram was like, okay, so it wasn't that they were just horrible people, it was that they were following, authority figures. And, that's what soldiers are supposed to do. It's a reason we go through basic training, right? I'm going to break you down and build you back up, and so that you do what I say. Because you don't want to be a general and say, hey, go over that hill and go shoot people, and have all your soldiers say, but why? Do we have to? I don't want to, right? You want them just to do what you say. So Milgram said, well, we can pretty much get anyone to do that, right? We can get anyone to follow the authority and be obedient. So he designed this beautiful study. And by beautiful, I mean the design of it was beautifully done. There was a lot of, let's just say, unethical parts to it, but it was very well designed. So again, we're going to use deception, and we're going to use confederates. All right, what's deception? You can answer out loud in your own homes. It's when we lie to people. And who are the confederates? They're the people that work for the experimenter, usually graduate students. So we're going to have both again. So Milgram's going to bring in a person to be studied. The person comes in, and there's another person in the room, and they're going to say, okay, this is, Mr. Johnson, and he's also here. He's going to be part of the study as well. All right, so we have, let's say, Joe and Mr. Johnson. And Joe's the one we're actually experimenting on. Mr. Johnson works for Milgram. Joe doesn't know that. And they say, okay, we're going to be doing a study on learning. Ah, here comes the deception. It's a learning study, and I need someone to be the teacher, and I need someone to be the learner. So at this point, Mr. Johnson, the Confederate, would say, I'll be the learner, right? Because we need him to say that. And they say, okay, and they take him into a room, and they strap him to a chair. Do I have a picture of him? There he is. Getting strapped to the chair. And they say, okay, we're going to give you these little electric shocks when you get a wrong answer. So what you're going to have to do is you have to memorize these pairs of words. So the teacher is going to read you paired words. So it would be like green, tree, happy, cloud, foot, apple, or whatever. And then we're going to read you those paired words, and we're going to go back and we're going to say the first word, right, green, and you're going to have to remember that the paired word with it is tree. If you get it right, you'll be told it's correct. If you get it wrong, you'll get a little electric shock. So that's what they're told. So Mr. Johnson says, oh, well, I have a heart problem. Is this going to be a problem? And the experimenter guy, this guy, who also works for Milgram, says, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. He's like, you know what, let me give you a little shock right now so you can see. So he gives him a little shock, and he's like, oh, that's not bad. And so Bob, is that what I named this guy? They say, Bob, why don't you have a little shock too, so you can see what it feels like. So the guy we're actually experimenting on gets a little shock too, and he's like, yeah, okay, I guess that's not that bad. And so we strap Mr. Johnson in, and we say, okay, we're going to go into the other room, and he'll read you the list of words, and then the experiment will start. And he's like, okay, sounds good. So Bob is brought into a room and put in front of this little device here that has a bunch of little things that you can click. And it starts down here, it says low, and then it starts to go up a little bit higher, medium, and high, and then extreme, and then the last one's just marked like XXX, like danger. And he's told, okay, read the list of words to Mr. Johnson, and then go back up to the beginning, and then just read the first word, and see if he gets the answer correct. So he says, okay, so he reads the list of words, and he gets to the first one, he says green, and Mr. Johnson says, tree. Actually, he hits a button in the other room. And for, A for tree. He says, correct. And he says, okay, and he gives him the next one, and I already forgot what it was, happy. And the guy says, foot. Oh, that's wrong. And so he says, okay, give him the shock. Start at the lowest level. So he starts down here at the lowest level shock, and he shocks him. And at this point, Mr. Johnson, he gets shocked, and you hear him in the other room say, ah! So now Bob knows that he can hear Mr. Johnson in the other room as he's shocking him. So that gets a little bit upsetting to him. And so he's like, okay, so the experimenter, the guy that's running the experiment, who again is another Confederate of Milgram. So he's dressed in a lab coat like, you see in this picture, and he's got that, ever needed clipboard. And he says, please continue, on the next wrong answer, move up a shock level. And, Bob's like, well, we weren't told that part of it. And he says, just please continue. So he goes to the next word, and guess what? Mr. Johnson gets it wrong. And he says, okay, move up to the next shock level. So Bob's like, oh, okay. So he shocks them, and then we hear Mr. Johnson in the other room go, ah! It's like, oh, I think that one might have hurt him. And, experimenter guy says, please continue with the experiment. He's like, oh, God, okay, all right. So he goes to the next word, and the guy gets it wrong again. He says, move up to the next shock level. And, this keeps going, where he keeps getting the wrong answer, and Bob has to keep moving up and giving him a higher and higher and higher shock. Well, as he keeps going, the, sounds of complaint coming from Mr. Johnson from the other room, which, by the way, he wasn't actually being shocked, are getting higher and higher. So he's just like, ow, that one hurt. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so, Bob starts really freaking out, because he's just like, I don't think we should do this anymore. Like, we should stop. Should we check on him? And scientist guy's like, please continue. The experiment requires you continue. Every now and then he might throw in he's all right. Don't worry about it. The shocks won't cause any problems. And pretty much all he says to him continually is, please continue. The experiment requires you continue. That's it. And he's sitting behind a desk. He's not blocking the doorway or anything. He's just telling, this guy, please keep going. So he keeps going. So when he gets to about this level, Mr. Johnson yells from the other room, my heart, I think something's wrong. Please, I want to stop. And, Bob's just like, oh God, we need to. And so he, like, starts, like, chain smoking, and he's freaking out, and, the experimenter's like, please continue. The experiment requires you continue. And he's, like, covered in sweat. He's like, I can't keep going. And please continue. The experiment requires you continue. And he's like, oh God. And so you can there's video of this. You can YouTube. You can actually watch this because Milgram recorded it. Of this guy just, he is in physical pain as he continues to go because he doesn't want to keep shocking this guy, but yet he keeps doing it. And he shocks him all the way up higher and higher and higher until eventually you hear the guy go, oh, and then there's like a thud. And so, like, you're pretty sure he's dead. And then he keeps going. He keeps shocking him, and he shocks him all the way up to the XXX danger, like, don't hit it mark. So here's where, like, it gets a little unethical. So for the first few rounds of this, the first few people they brought in to run this experiment on, at this point, where they think they've just pretty much killed someone, they just let them leave. They didn't debrief them. They're like, okay, thanks, bye. Like, super, super unethical and horrifying that they just let these people leave thinking that they had become murderers. So, thankfully, Milgram's wife was like, not cool. You gotta debrief them. So, after a little while, longer than it should have been, he started to debrief them. So, Milgram would show up himself. He would come in and he'd be like, okay, hey, Bob, or whatever your name is. So here's Mr. Johnson. We brought him in from the other room. He wasn't actually hurt. He works for me. It's fine. Turns out you're not a murderer. It's cool. But hey, Bob, why the hell did you keep shocking him? You could hear him in pain. You could hear that he wanted to leave, but you kept going. He's like, why did you keep doing that? And across the board, they would be like, well, the doctor or whatever kept telling us. And they're like, okay. So what? Why didn't you just get up and leave? Just got up out of your chair and walked out. Was there anything stopping you from doing that? And the guys would be like, and then you just watch their faces just completely change. Just like the students in my class, they're just completely changed because then it finally does dawn on them that they could have just gotten up and left. There was absolutely nothing stopping them from getting up out of that chair and walking out of that room and leaving that experiment. They could have done it at any time. But yet, they didn't. They kept going because a guy in a lab coat with a clipboard kept telling them to continue. And that realization that that's all it took for them to go against all of their kind of moral and, like, ethical, beliefs was, absolutely horrifying to people, which, as it should be. So Milgram published his results, and he said, okay, hey, look, America, turns out that rich white guys from America are just as likely to be, like, horrible murderers as Nazi soldiers were. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's horrifying. But you know what? It's because you used men. If you used women, women would never shock people all the way up to that level because women have, like, empathy and they're nurturers. So Milgram said, okay, let's bring the women in. So we started bringing women in to be an experimenter. Guess what? Women shocked them all the way up to that XXX level 2. Slightly smaller percent of women went all the way to the highest level, but still the majority of them did. Didn't matter. Men or women, didn't matter. Everybody's shocking them till they're dead. So he publishes that. People were like, okay, no, we're not as bad as Nazis. We're not as bad as Nazis. No. So the reason this is happening, you see, is because they can't see the guy, because he's in another room. If you can see him, people wouldn't shock him to the highest level. So Milgram's like, all right, challenge accepted. Puts a window between the two rooms. So now you can see the guy being shocked. All right, so now he's got to use his acting skills. Even seeing him being shocked, people still shocked him all the way up to the highest level. The percentage went down slightly, but still, majority of people shocked all the way. Publishes that. People were like, oh God, we're looking more like Nazis. This isn't good. Okay. Well, it's because the person's not in the same room as them. If they were in the same room as them, they wouldn't shock them. So Milgram's like, let's do it. Puts them in the same room, sitting within a few feet of each other. Still shocked all the way up to the point where the person's, like, convulsing in front of them and they still kept shocking him. All right. Again, smaller percentage. His percentages kept going down, but still, majority of people would do it. All right. There is no difference in people with this. All right. It's that if we give someone authority, we will obey what they say, even when it goes against what we think we should do. And this could be very dangerous. All right. This is how bad things can happen. Again, we need obedience, right? Just like we need conformity. In some instances, it is very important for survival, but it is also very easily manipulated. All right. And so later on at the end of this chapter, we're going to talk about things like cults and cult leaders, right? And how people, are given, we give them the authority and then we obey whatever they say. And we stop questioning. We stop questioning if it's right or wrong. We just say, well, we'll just do it because you say so. All right. That level of obedience to authority can become very scary very fast. And it's when people can very easily start to get hurt. And when we could very easily start to have this, you're different from me, and my authority figure says you're bad, and so it's okay if bad things happen to you. All right, and that we're going to kind of talk about how that plays into other aspects of social psychology as we move throughout the next few slides.